we learnt about the transfer of Nayef Aguerd from Stade Rennes to West Ham United? And in particular, why is it interesting? Well, as I covered yesterday, it's interesting because this is Newman and Moyes' first joint transfer, if you know what I mean. As I say, from now on, we drew the line in the sand. Anything from now onwards, we know is a David Moyes signing. Somebody asked in the comments yesterday, how do you know? How do you know it was a David Moyes signing? How do you know David Moyes was involved in negotiations? Well, maybe I didn't explain it completely correctly. David Moyes wasn't involved in the negotiations in as much as he didn't meet with the agents to discuss finances and bonuses. That was what Rob Newman did. Newman was given a budget with which to get this player. And every subsequent player will be given a budget as well. What David Moyes did is David Moyes met with the player just to discuss what the player's role would be within the team, how he would fit into the club. I think there was a massive, massive part of David Moyes actually looking at him thinking, do I like him? And I'll tell you what, he seems very, very likeable. So how do I know that? How do I know David Moyes met with the player? Well, because they said so. Aguerd said so, and David Moyes said so, and David Moyes said he met with him more than once, and of course the interview seemed to confirm that. When I was talking about the interview, and thanks to a couple of the people in the comments yesterday who pointed out that that there was actually a West Ham interview. It was with Carlton Cole. It's really good. If you haven't seen it, it's on the West Ham YouTube channel. Really good. I tell you what, the lad seems really likeable, and I think the club did really well by getting Carlton Cole, who's extremely likeable himself, to interview him. It was really relaxed. You could just see instantly why Aguerd would be. Look, I would defy anybody that would meet him would not think he was a nice guy. He's a nice guy. He's funny. His English is very, very impressive. In fact, that's the first thing. That's the last thing that goes when you learn a language. The last thing to come is the humour. And he's got it. He clearly has. His English is excellent. He's done his homework on the club. It was really nice to see Ogbonna come out and meet him. Anyway, sorry, I'm digressing. That's not what we've. I guess we've learned. He's a nice guy and he seems to be of good character. And that's what I mean. Maybe it was just David Moyes needed to sit across. Sit across a desk, probably no desk, sit on the sofa, whatever, have a chat with him, and not only outline his place in the team and what he expects from him, but also for David Moyes to think, do I like him? Actually, I do. I get on with him. That's great. He'd be part of the group. What we have learnt from this, though, is that West Ham have not been able to keep this transfer deal quiet. And that's got nothing to do with David Moyes at all. David Moyes would like to keep everything quiet. I don't know where it's come from. I just know where it hasn't come from. And it hasn't come from, I'm talking about the leaks and the news. It hasn't come from David Moyes himself. And it won't have come from Newman, because there's just no way he would have done. Let's be fair, Newman kept his mouth shut. We haven't heard a peep out of him, and all the time he was on gardening leave, you didn't hear anything out of him. It wasn't like he was leaking players to the club or anything. So it's neither of those two. I just think it's probably come from Aguerd's side. I just think might be him, might be Stade Rennes. I just think once you start sitting down to talk with a player, once you've met someone 2 or 3 times, once the agents are involved, then it becomes very, very difficult then to keep anything like that quiet, really, doesn't it? The other thing that I do find interesting, another place it's not come from, a couple of the agents that David Sullivan generally uses for transfers, his chosen agents. The reason it's not really come from them is because they weren't involved. And this is another reason I think that David Moyes really has had to almost prize control out of the palms of David Sullivan. And I reckon he's probably had to do it kicking and screaming, no, give it to me, give it here. I reckon there's been a lot of that going on, and try and sort of just wrestle control from him. And as I say, it must be difficult for Sullivan. I do sort of get that, but he's handed the reins over now because of that. Those agents, you all know who they are. Those agents have not been involved in the deal, which I think it's got to be a good thing. It really has to be a good thing. I think the moment you start to use a set number, just set agents, and you won't use anybody else, you're limiting your choices, aren't you, really? So I think that's really important. If you won't, unfortunately, if you want to get a player, you're going to have to, it's nice to shop in your favourite shop, isn't it? It's nice to go to your normal places, but sometimes you've got to step outside your comfort zone, and if to get the right player, you've got to deal with different agents, then so be it. The only thing I would probably look at it and just wonder, I don't know what, because David Moyes' son is involved. It's the only thing I would probably look at on this one. I think, well, look, we had a bit of that with Huselos, we had a bit of that with Pellegrini. To what extent he's involved in the deal, I don't know. Hopefully not too much at all. But I like the way the business has been done, certainly. So here's something else that we've learned from this, and that is that we can perhaps in some way trust some of the sources. We can trust that maybe a prolonged deal is going to happen. Now, you may well remember that I spoke about this at the start of the window. I said, don't discount a rumour that's running and running. That happened with Zuma, the Zuma rumour. It also happened with Areola. I'm talking about when we got him on loan last season. These ran for a long time and we still signed them. So, it does make me think, out of the other players we're continually linked with, bearing in mind we can now believe that there is a transfer budget there, which ones are going to be true? Before I get into that, you can find out and you can read about lots more transfer rumours surrounding West Ham by clicking and downloading the OneFootball app, which you can use by clicking the link that's underneath the screen just here, or by scanning that QR code just up there. Why would you download the OneFootball app? Well, it saves you a hell of a lot of time. It stops you going and looking at the newspapers for all the West Ham news, all the different generic Premier League websites, the World Football websites, because what it does, it goes and grabs the news from all the different sources on the internet, works out whether they're West Ham based or not, puts them all into one place for you, so you don't have to go searching for it. All you've got to do when you download it, and it is free, is tell the app that you support West Ham, and it'll put everything together in one place for you. Use the link below. They'll know you've come from Hammers Chat. They may even give us more sponsorship again in the future. You never know. So there's going to be a lot of rumours on that OneFootball app, and the one I keep seeing is Emmanuel Dennis. And I don't know whether this is to believe. It sort of makes sense positionally. That makes sense, doesn't it? Is it true? I don't know. One thing we certainly do know here is that David Moyes had met with Aguerd on a number of occasions, at least twice. How many? We don't know, but at least twice. On a number of occasions before this has happened. Now, I don't think that was sort of last Friday and last Saturday. I would imagine for as long as the rumour's been going on, I would imagine over the last 2 or 3 weeks, David Moyes has met up with him. Now, obviously, during that time, Newman has met up with representatives and agents have met with agents. So, clearly there was a dialogue going on here. Now, where I think that falls down a little bit is you do allow other clubs to come in and maybe pinch your players and nick your players. That being said, I'm not entirely sure, I believe, about Newcastle coming in. Not sure. Not too sure about that at all. But what it does show is that if we are doing that, and that's our way of making transfers, that's our method, that's our method of operation, so to speak, then it stands to reason that we're already in negotiations and talking to other players of other clubs. Because the fee is the easiest bit, isn't it? That's what would have been negotiated with Stade Rennais straight away. Before they will even release the player for talks. He's not out of contract, Aguerd. We must have gone to them really early and said, here's a transfer fee, what's acceptable. There'd have been some form of negotiation. At that point, Stade Rennais would have said, OK, we're happy with that, or we're close enough in the deal, we can iron out the small print. You can now speak to the player. At that point, they release the player. It's no longer tapping up. You can then have a negotiation with him and his representatives. I think it's a 2-3 week process. I really do. So it would not surprise me if whoever we are about to sign next, David Moyes is already sitting down talking with them now. Now, you may well have seen the story in the Evening Standard where I think it was Ken Dyer said he's looking to sign 5 or 6 more players. There's no point me going into the positions. You all know the positions that we think we should sign them. But something is happening. Something is stirring. And, I mean, well, you know this. I was starting to get worried. Not so much that we lacked ambition to get someone. I always knew David Moyes is nobody's fault. David Moyes knew last season his squad is thin. He just tried to gamble. In the end, you tell me whether it failed or whether it succeeded. I mean, I guess David Moyes could probably argue that qualifying for Europe again and getting semi-final meant it succeeded. Okay, fair enough. But what it does do is it does demonstrate that David Moyes is nobody's fault. David Moyes would understand. So David Moyes is going to look to bring new players in. And if he is looking to bring new players in, then he's already a certain way down the road of doing that, which is just what I was saying there. Who's it going to be? I mean, look, I don't know. I'm not even to pretend I don't know, but Evening Standard sort of alluded to 5 or 6. It's going to be really interesting because, as I say, I was wondering whether that was going to happen. I was wondering whether our method of doing business was any good. I thought there were certain aspects to our recruitment of players that was flawed, certainly. And this gives me a little bit more hope, as I mentioned before. I really do think there clearly is a due process there. I think he's always going to be slow. He's never going to be quick at recruiting these players. I certainly don't think that will be the case. However, he certainly is methodical. I think, as I mentioned in the previous video, if he gets it right, he's going to get all the accolades. If he gets it wrong, he's going to have to take the criticism on this one. But I do believe we will be in for other players. And the more I look at it, and the more I look at the fact that we have gone for a player who, let's be fair, no one was mentioning, not in the comments or anyone else, but we've gone for a player who, because we didn't know him, I would suggest has been scouted. That's a clever bit of scouting. Well, presuming he's a decent player. But there were a lot of us, and you've only got to read the comments almost every time I do a transfer update and do the gossip or the tittle-tattle. There'll always be a comment. I don't know why you're bothering, mate. We're not going to sign anyone. And to be fair, whilst I don't agree with it, I mean, I can understand people's frustrations. I can understand why they think that. I can understand why they're, sort of glum about it, basically, why they're a bit downbeat. So I think this gives us a little bit of hope, a little adrenaline shot in the arm to think that whoever we're looking at next is going to be well scouted. I think whoever we're looking at next is probably going to be looking to fit that David Moyes MOT. And I do, the more I look at it, believe that's probably why we didn't go in for Basuma as well, because obviously he's got the unfortunate legal business hanging over his head. I would imagine David Moyes probably takes one look at that because I'm not getting involved in all of that at all. So I don't know. Is it Emmanuel Dennis? I struggle to think it's James Ward-Prowse. The more I look at the way we're doing things now, maybe it is. Maybe it is. I don't know. But what I do think is that there are at least another couple of players to come in who we don't know about. Now, we may well have been linked with them already, because as we've seen, the leaks sort of get out there, don't they? They sort of permeate their way into the news and onto the websites and whatnot. But I like this. But I tell you what, one thing I do know, if there is a unheard of centre-back out there who David Moyes feels can do a job in the Premier League for West Ham United, as much as we get linked with Rafinha or we get linked with Abroya or James Ward-Prowse or any of these Premier League players that we've all heard of and we all know and probably don't require scouting, I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility, bearing in mind we just signed Aguerd, that there's actually a left-back, a striker, a midfielder, excuse me, and a left winger out there who we haven't heard of either.